Which brings us to the team that finished in 6th last season. And I almost asked Neeler to be on X's favorite Ottawa Senators hater.
Yeah.
You know why, though, right?
For that sweet, sweet ad revenue. And it
All
worked
that
beautifully.
$13 a month from Twitter, baby. I got Wendy's today because of the Sens fans.
So funny.
Ottawa, and for Detroit, by the way, I think we kind of summed it up in terms of where we thought they'd be. More likely about the same, could be better. It's really weird to tell. And Ottawa is going to be in that same boat at the start of this season. They do have a lot to prove. Now, obviously, the big players for them, Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stützle. Again, Tim Stützle looking like an absolute steal of a 3rd overall pick. My God.
Yes, he is.
Sorry, Sin. Sin, you want to remind the class of how Ottawa ended up with that pick?
No,
but in terms of big changes for them this season, I mean, obviously you lose DeBrincat, you get Dominic Kubalik back. There's Vladimir Tarasenko on a 1-year deal, which is really weird. Josh Norris only played 8 games last year. They have other younger guys who might get better. Jake Sanderson got the big contract. It doesn't look that bad. And then you get to their goaltending. The biggest X factor maybe in the league at this stage. Jonas Korpisalo, $4 million a year, and Anton Forsberg, who was okay-ish. Only had a .902 last year, but has looked better at times, but only played 28 games last year due to injury. This is the hardest division to predict for me heading into this next season, because I could see the Sens in the exact same conversation as the Red Wings and the Habs. You could argue that in some regards, the Red Wings and the Habs, or the Red Wings and the Sens, are a little bit further ahead than Montreal at this stage. But does that guarantee that they can push for a playoff spot? Given, the 4 teams that did make the playoffs from the Atlantic last season still have a very good chance to do so. I just don't know what to make of them. They could be a playoff team. This could be a disaster.
It'll be so top heavy. Go ahead, reveal.
It'll be really interesting too, because I mean, looking at daily faceoff here, you got Tkachuk, Stützle, Giroux, great line, Tarasenko, Norris, Batherson. That has the potential to be one of the better second lines. A little confused though, because Shane Pinto's here, but they still got to figure out that money situation over there, and I think their bottom 6 is a little. It's okay. You take Shane Pinto out of there, and it's Ridley Gregg, Matthew Joseph, who might be on the move, Mark Kostelik, Zach McEwen, Dominic Kubalik. Like, it's not really screaming sexy to me. It's screaming, I don't know, mid.
Yeah. Sin, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think they could surprise people and make the playoffs because, again, some of their players are just so freaking good. I think Sanderson's going to take an enormous stride, and he's going to start turning into, we're going to start seeing it. And I mean, he could absolutely bust and stuff like that. I don't see it. I'm really, really high on Jake Sanderson, and I'm extraordinarily high on Tim Stützle. And I know, people do like to hate on him, particularly Leafs fans, particularly Neeler. But my God, that kid can play hockey, and I'm obviously a bit over the salt of him. That he could have been the Sharks' pick if everything didn't go wrong that one season after acquiring Karlsson. He's so good. Like, he's ridiculously good. I don't. If he was in Toronto, people would understand how good he is, because Ottawa's one of the more smaller Canadian markets and stuff like that. I feel like he's kind of been overlooked, which might be good for him. More of a European type player. It might be good for him to be kind of overlooked. He's a monster, and already, and the fact that he's only 21 is stupid. Like, he has a very similar trajectory to Mitch Marner. He might, and I'm trying to look up career. He may have even been ahead of Marner at the age. I'm not too sure. I'd have to pull up like comparisons and stuff like that. But he's so good, and he's a center. Everyone loves centers.
Yeah, exactly. I think you mentioned playoffs there, and I think if they're in a division like the Pacific or the Central, I think they're a playoff team.
Mhm.
I'll talk about it a bit more later. I think the other 5 teams ahead of them are still better.
Definitely.
And I think one of them is going to make a significant jump, which I'm sure we can all guess who, but we'll talk about that in a bit. But I don't know, Steve, you think in playoffs or not playoffs for Ottawa? This division is so hard.
I want to say yes because I am with Sin. I genuinely believe that they have their number one center in Tim Stützle, and I think they have their number one defenseman in Jake Sanderson. I looked it up for Stützle, by the way. Now that he's completed 3 seasons in the NHL, his first 2 seasons were worse than the pace that Mitch Marner was on. Marner was fucking good from the get-go, but it was that 3rd season where Marner hit 94 points in 82 games. Stützle had 90 in 78. So very, very similar year 3s in terms of, again, Marner out of the gates was better, but season 3 point totals, not bad. And you could argue, of course, Marner would have had better line mates when he pulled that off as a Maple Leaf. So,
and also the transition from Europe to North American play. There's always a slower pickup for those European dudes.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very true. Man, I like this is that one division, like I said, where it's flip a coin.
Yeah.
You know, will they make the playoffs? Won't they? So
I'll say one more thing about the Sens before we move on. I think for them to make the playoffs, it's all dependent on X factors. X factor, how are other teams doing? Does Boston fall off as much? Does Buffalo have that typical December, January slide where they just absolutely stink it up? You know, there's so many different X factors, so many teams waiting their turn. Also, the big X factor for them is Josh Norris fully healthy, and does he return to form? Because that's a big question. That's a major injury.
Yeah.
Is he going to return to form? I thought he was a great pick when the Sharks picked him. Jesus. And to see him do that well in Ottawa was a bit surprising. I didn't know if he was that good, but also, like who's to say? I hope for his sake that he can return to form, and for Ottawa's sake, because they got him on a lot of money right now. Nearly 8, if I recall correctly. 7, 9. Where the hell is he listed on here?
Josh Norris?
Yeah, 795 because he's on IR.
Right. I mean, Sin, the good news is you can vicariously live through the Sens because they have all the top prospects that could have been Sharks.
Pretty much, dude. Like Norris was our Couture clone, essentially. Like that's why we drafted him. He was like our Couture clone, and shit, man, he's definitely proven to be that, perhaps even better.